Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jason Whitmore was the kind of teenager that many underestimated. He had an unusual calm for his age, and although his parents tried to convince him that the right path was college, he kept his feet on the ground and his ideas firm. Thomas, his father, always made a point of stressing that no one got far without a degree, that the world out there was cruel, and that the minimum a decent man should have was a college education. Linda, his mother, followed her husband's speech, worried about the idea of seeing her son deviate from traditional plans. But Jason observed everything in silence, with his head full of plans that weren't in academic books or classrooms. The only one who really understood him was his grandfather Gerald. The connection between them went back early. When he was a child, Jason used to accompany his grandfather on visits to vacant lots and abandoned houses that he bought to renovate and resell. The boy watched his grandfather talk to construction workers, architects, store owners, and saw how every wall built or torn down had a purpose. That stayed with him. And when it came time to decide what he would do after high school, Jason was straightforward. He wanted to work in real estate. He wanted to buy, renovate, and sell. Thomas almost had a breakdown. He thought it was a passing fancy. Linda cried for days. But Gerald not only supported, he bet. He sold a small warehouse he no longer used and put the money into his grandson's hands. He said that would be the first test. Jason bought a house almost in ruins, with a crooked roof and cracks everywhere. He spent weeks studying videos, reading everything about renovations, calling experienced people, asking questions, learning by doing. He slept little, but smiled more than ever. When the house was ready, simple, but safe and functional, he managed to sell it for almost double the price. The feeling he had was unforgettable. There, he began a journey that would change his life. At 18 years old, he registered his own company and named it Ironwood Developments, in honor of the strong wood his grandfather said was a symbol of perseverance. With the money from the first sale, he bought 2 more properties and repeated the process. He started being known in the region as the guy who renovated houses alone. Soon, he attracted the attention of real estate agents who wanted to make partnerships. It was in this context that he met Nina and April, 2 charismatic and ambitious sisters. Both were interested in him, each in their own way. With Nina, there was immediate chemistry. April was more reserved, but didn't hide her admiration. The conversations turned into dates. The dates, intimacy. Jason, young and still learning how to handle his own success, became involved with both at different times, without imagining the consequences of that. What he lived with Nina was impulsive, with April, more curious. But everything changed when he met Tessa, the younger sister. She appeared during a casual visit to the sister's office and left Jason intrigued. Tessa was different. She didn't have that competitive air, didn't try to impress anyone, and was firm in what she said. Unlike the others, she seemed not to care about him at all. That woke him up in an unexpected way. He decided to get to know her better. And the more they talked, the more he realized she saw the world in a way similar to his. Direct, no nonsense, no games. When she told him she was studying to work in school administration, he was charmed. Not because of the job, but because of her passion for education, her desire to make a difference. They started dating and the relationship became intense. Tessa found out about the relationships Jason had with the sisters, and even though she didn't hide her discomfort, she said that was part of the past, and that the present depended on him. Jason saw in that attitude a maturity he hadn't seen in other people he had been with. For her, he started rethinking how he conducted his personal life. He left flirts behind, focused on business and the relationship. In no time, they were living together. Shortly after, they got married. It was a simple wedding, but true. A silent pact between 2 young people who knew what they wanted, each in their own way. While many childhood friends were still trying to figure out what they would do with their lives, Jason had already built a small local empire of renovated properties. He had vision, courage, and willingness. He was respected in the market, even though he was so young. The connection with Tessa seemed to reinforce this growth path even more. Together, they began dreaming of a family. When Tessa became pregnant with their first daughter, Jason decided to slow down the construction projects and started hiring a trusted team to manage the projects. From then on, his priorities began to change. Work was still important, but taking care of the house, his wife, and the baby on the way became an essential part of the routine. The young man who once was said to be throwing away his life by refusing college was now a solid entrepreneur, about to become a father. But none of this would have happened if he had ignored his instincts, or let himself be carried away by the fear of disappointing his parents. Gerald, the grandfather, continued to be by his side, watching everything with pride. Whenever he could, Jason took him to visit a new project or show him the before and after of a renovation. His eyes sparkled when he saw his grandson turning ruins into homes. That generational connection remained alive. And it was precisely this family foundation, this link between past and present, that would support Jason through the storms yet to come. Jason's life began to shape into something bigger than he had imagined. Beside Tessa, everything seemed to work in harmony. When Ellie was born, he dedicated himself completely to the new role of father. He didn't outsource that responsibility. He learned to change diapers, give baths, get up in the middle of the night. Tessa, who returned to work soon after maternity leave, trusted him to take care of the baby with the same attention he gave to his company projects. And he did it with pleasure, presence, and commitment. It was as if he had discovered a part of himself he didn't even know existed. Over time, came Brooke and then Harper. 3 girls, 3 worlds, and Jason embraced everything without hesitation. The routine was full of commitments, but also of meaning. He started the day feeding the daughters, taking them to school, stopping by the Ironwood Development's office to review contracts, visit worksites, solve pending issues. Afterward, he returned before dinner to be with the family. He made sure to keep Sunday lunches together, even if it was just simple food. For him, the value wasn't in the menu, but in the conversations, the stories, the smiles around the table. Tessa, slowly, stood out as a school administrator, promoted for real merits, with dedication and results. She was a respected professional, with a firm, ethical, and at the same time welcoming posture. Jason admired that. He told everyone that Tessa was the real brain of the house, while he was just the heart beating in the rhythm of the family. They lived in a comfortable house, directly a result of his work. But everything changed when Gerald passed away and left the Netto, the old rural property where he spent summers with his wife before the illness. It was a simple place, with a structure that already showed its age, but surrounded by good memories. Jason visited the place with the daughters, who loved the spacious area, the silence, the freedom. He decided to renovate the place completely, respecting the essence, but making it functional for a family with 3 children and an intense routine. The renovation lasted months, but he supervised every detail. When it was ready, it felt like they were starting a new stage. They moved there permanently. And everything gained another rhythm. In the new house, Jason found balance. The place allowed the girls to run freely, gave him a space just to draw up projects, and let Tessa study and work with peace of mind. They started creating their own traditions. On the first Saturday of each month, they had a picnic in the grass. Every Friday night was pizza night made at home. During winter, they camped inside the living room, setting up makeshift tents with blankets and mattresses, just to stay together. The house became more than a home. It was a symbol. A landmark of what they had built as a family. At the same time, Jason expanded his business. He stopped working only with renovations and started investing in rental properties. He bought old houses, put them up for rent with affordable contracts, and guaranteed steady income. He also began acting in the fast resale market, identifying good opportunities and closing deals quickly. The Ironwood Developments grew, gained respect, attracted investors. Jason, however, didn't get dazzled. He kept the focus on the family. He preferred to earn less and be present rather than increase revenue at the cost of absence. Tessa respected that, even if she didn't always understand his attachment to certain routines. Sometimes, she showed a desire to travel more, take courses abroad, attend conferences with her sisters. He supported, took care of the kids alone, reorganized everything so she could develop professionally. It was during these trips that small noises began to appear. Nothing serious. Just longer silences on the phone, evasive answers when he asked how her day was. Jason sensed something different, but preferred to attribute it to tiredness, stress, distance. He trusted. Always had. He believed that respect was the base of any relationship. Meanwhile, he kept the house running, took the daughters to medical appointments, prepared their school lunches, solved household and business tasks. He took care of everything as if it were his only job. And for him, it was. Tessa was grateful. She always said she didn't know how he managed to handle everything. Jason smiled and answered that it was because he was sure the family came before any business. Inside this scenario, small stories emerged showing exactly who Jason was. Like the day Harper fell off her bike and hurt her knee. Tessa was traveling, her sisters couldn't help. Jason dropped an important meeting, ran to pick her up from school, stopped by the pharmacy, prepared a first aid kit, and spent the rest of the day with his daughter in his arms, watching cartoons and joking about the colorful bandage she chose. Or that time when Brooke had a high fever during the night. He stayed awake measuring her temperature every hour, with the thermometer in one hand and the phone in the other, looking up tips and ways to relieve her discomfort. Ellie, older, once said in front of everyone, "My dad is like a superhero who uses a drill and a pan." Jason laughed, but felt a pride that even the biggest contracts of his company couldn't provide. Meanwhile, the relationship with Tessa remained solid on the outside. They had long conversations when they were alone, made plans for the future, thought about where each daughter might study, how they could help the girls choose their paths. Tessa seemed happy. She spoke about her work with enthusiasm, praised Jason's dedication. They made sure to have a dinner for two once a month, something simple, but just the two of them. And on those nights, she always thanked him for everything he did. Jason replied that it wasn't a sacrifice. It was life. Everything seemed balanced. And this balance, built brick by brick, step by step, was what gave meaning to what Jason believed about love, responsibility, and presence. He didn't see life in terms of success or failure. He saw it as construction. As a well-built house, with a strong foundation, aligned walls, and constant care. And within this house, nothing seemed more important to him than protecting what was most precious, his daughters and the woman he chose to share everything with. Until, gradually, cracks began to appear where he least expected. And the structure he believed indestructible began to show fractures. The first time Jason suspected something was by accident. He was returning from the warehouse where he stored building materials when he decided to enter the house through the back door, which he rarely did. He heard muffled laughter coming from the living room and thought Tessa was on a call with her sisters. He grabbed a bottle of water and listened, without intending to intrude on the conversation. But something caught his attention. Her laughter sounded tense, forced. The words came quickly, as if hiding something. He didn't want to interfere, but when he heard his own name in the middle of the conversation, he froze. Tessa said that Jason would never know anything, and that trip to San Diego should have been avoided, especially with that doctor involved. Nina's voice came next, trying to calm the situation. April, with a sharp tone, suggested they delete anything that was still saved on the phone. Jason felt his heart race. That wasn't a light conversation between sisters. It was an exchange of information about something serious. He went back to the car and sat there for a few minutes, trying to understand what he had heard. There was no direct mention of infidelity, but everything pointed to it. He remembered the annual trips Tessa took with her sisters, always to different cities. He justified it by saying it was a way to maintain the bond between them. Jason found it beautiful. He always respected it, took care of the kids with love, kept the house organized for when his wife returned. Now, all these memories seemed to form a distorted image of what he believed to be true. When Tessa noticed his presence at home, she came smiling and asked if he needed help with something. Jason looked at her, trying to see some answer in her features. She seemed calm, serene, as if nothing had happened. He faked that everything was okay. Said he had just come back to get a document and left. That night, he had trouble sleeping. He thought about the words he had heard, the tone of the voices, the strange pauses. He remembered that weeks earlier, Tessa had had an infection and mentioned it could be urinary, maybe caused by contaminated water from one of the trips. At the time, Jason took it seriously, bought the prescribed medications, made light soups, and took care of her with all his attention. Now, all that seemed like a curtain hiding something much bigger. The next day, he took his wife's phone while she was in the shower. He knew the password, had never had reason to suspect. He searched for conversations with her sisters, but almost everything had been deleted. He found it strange. He only found a history of calls and a cloud file she had forgotten to disconnect. Inside, prints of hotel reservations, a document with notes about clinics in another state, and, among the files, a message exchange with a contact saved only as Dr. L. The messages started professionally, but gradually took a more intimate tone. They were full of compliments, hints, and one that said, "I can't stop thinking about that night, even though it was a mistake." Jason read that with trembling hands. He knew it wasn't a coincidence. That was the San Diego trip, the same one mentioned in the conversation with the sisters. Tessa had crossed a line Jason never imagined she would even consider. And the worst thing, the sisters covered for her, as if everything was part of a secret agreement between them. For 3 days, Jason isolated himself. He went to work, took care of the kids, but avoided any deeper contact with Tessa. He needed to think. He needed to understand what to do. He felt betrayed not only by his wife but also by the women who, for years, he accepted as part of the family. He started remembering past episodes with a different view. Remembered the time Harper had a recital and Tessa didn't show up, claiming the flight was delayed. At the time, he accepted the excuse without questioning. Now, he wondered if she had even taken that flight. Or the night he arranged a surprise dinner and, upon arriving home, she was strangely distant, as if she wasn't really there. Jason realized he had been ignoring signs, pretending certain behaviors were normal because he believed in the love he felt. He decided to talk to her, but not to argue. He wanted to hear her, see if she would have the courage to tell the truth. During a common dinner, when the girls were already asleep, he asked how that San Diego trip had been. Tessa froze for a second, then resumed her usual speech, lectures, outings with her sisters, little free time. Jason kept his expression neutral. Then he asked if she had met someone from work there. She hesitated, said yes, but that they had only had coffee. Jason thanked her for her honesty and left the table. He had the confirmation he needed. The lie was there, and she maintained it naturally. That same week, Jason acted with surgical coldness. He talked to the lawyer who had drawn up the prenuptial contract years ago. Explained the situation, presented the conversation prints, reservation records, documents. The lawyer didn't hesitate. He said the contract was clear. In case of proven infidelity, Jason would have full custody of the daughters and complete ownership of the assets built up until then. Even devastated emotionally, Jason focused on logistics. Prepared the paperwork, organized the documents, acted as if it were just another of the many projects he had executed in his life. The difference was that this project wouldn't end with a ribbon cutting, but with a rupture that would change everything forever. While organizing everything, Jason made sure to continue taking care of the daughters with the same love. He didn't vent his frustration onto them. Maintained the routine intact. Took them to and from school, helped with homework, prepared dinner. Internally, he was going through a huge conflict. He loved the woman with whom he had built a life. But loving, at that moment, seemed insufficient in the face of what she had done. The feeling was of mourning for something that was still physically there but had already been emotionally destroyed. And even without knowing what tomorrow would bring, he decided he wouldn't live sustaining a lie. He was about to turn a definitive page, but before that, he needed to ensure that the daughters were protected, emotionally and legally, from the storm that was about to fall. Jason handed over the documents to his personal lawyer personally. Signed the last pages with a firm hand, as if sealing the end of a moral contract broken by the other party without remorse. The lawyer, experienced in divorce cases with prenuptial clauses, analyzed every detail of the evidence, the conversation prints, hotel reservations, the contact with the doctor, the travel dates, the conversation between the sisters. Everything fit precisely. He assured Jason that full custody of the daughters would be his, without room for contestation. It was evident who sustained the emotional home, who was present, who prioritized the children. In light of this, the process moved quickly. Tessa was informed by email and, at the same time, received the formal notice in person. Jason placed the papers on the table in the living room while taking the daughters to school. When he returned, she was sitting there with red eyes, holding the documents without saying a word. He didn't expect a confession, nor regret. But she tried. She started speaking in a low voice, saying she was confused, that she never wanted to destroy the family, that what happened was an isolated mistake. Jason corrected her calmly, saying that isolated mistakes don't repeat in different trips, with fabricated cover-ups, planned lies, deleted documents. She stopped arguing. Silence imposed itself between them like a wall that could no longer be bypassed. In the following days, Jason reorganized the routine of the daughters. Carefully explained that their mother would be away for a while. Ellie, already a teenager, understood everything immediately. Brooke asked few questions, but made it clear with her look that she had understood more than she said. Harper, the youngest, was confused. She asked if her mother was sick, if she would return, if they still loved her. Jason answered honestly, with the gentleness the situation allowed. He said families change, but his love as a father would remain whole, every day, without exception. Tessa left the house in silence. Took only 2 suitcases, some clothes, and personal items. She said she would call the daughters. Jason allowed it. The calls, however, became increasingly spaced out. Ellie refused them all. Brooke answered once and hung up halfway through the conversation. Harper still responded to some short messages, but fewer and fewer. Jason avoided interfering. He knew the bond between mother and daughters was a delicate matter and forcing any premature reconciliation could cause more damage than healing. Life began to adjust. Jason returned to work with more focus. Divided the company tasks better with his 2 main employees and started spending more time with the daughters outside the house. Took them hiking, outings, small weekend trips. Made sure each one of them felt safe. Renovated one of the rooms in the house to turn it into an art room, where all 3 could draw, paint, or simply listen to music. He wanted that home to be a space of emotional reconstruction, not a constant reminder of what was lost. Even in this new phase, Jason kept in touch with the lawyer to ensure the judicial process was handled cleanly. Tessa, advised by her own legal representatives, tried to revise the terms of the prenuptial, but the judge was direct. He said the evidence was clear, and the document signed before the marriage was legally valid. Full custody of the daughters remained with Jason. The property was redistributed as stipulated in the contract. She was given a smaller amount than she had expected, enough to start over, but far from what she would have had if there had been no proven infidelity. With the final decision in hand, Jason breathed a sigh of relief. It was strange to think that everything had unfolded in a matter of months. A marriage of years imploded in weeks. But instead of focusing on the pain of loss, he chose to observe what remained: the love of his daughters, the respect he had earned with his stance, and the certainty that he had acted with dignity at all times. The daughters noticed this. Ellie, who initially closed herself off, started helping more around the house. Brooke smiled again. Harper slept better. The absence of tension in the air made a difference in how each of them behaved. Over time, friends began to approach again. Some confessed they had already suspected something, but didn't know how to address it. Others said they admired how he had handled everything. Jason thanked them, but kept the description minimal. He didn't feel the need to expose Tessa, nor feed rumors. He preferred to protect the daughters and move forward with his own life. He had full awareness that her betrayal had left scars, but he wouldn't become a prisoner of bitterness. He continued to be a man who believed in family, even though his had been redesigned by force. One night, Brooke appeared in the living room with an envelope in her hands. Said it was a letter from school, but when Jason opened it, he realized it was a writing assignment. The topic was, "Someone I admire." Brooke had written about her father. She said he was strong, fair, kind, and made better pancakes than anyone else. Jason held back a laugh as he read that. When he finished, he hugged his daughter and put the paper in a box where he kept important memories. That was, without a doubt, one of the most valuable ones. From then on, something inside him began to change. He no longer woke up with the same weight in his chest. He no longer felt the absence of Tessa as a whole, but as a removed wall that now allowed more light. He didn't rush to start a new relationship. He had 3 good reasons to move forward slowly, and each of them slept in a different room in that house. If someone looked from the outside, they might say Jason had been cheated on. But if they looked closely, they would realize he had been faithful to the end, to the family, his own values, and what he believed was right. Months after the divorce ended, Jason received an email from the court informing him that there was a sealed envelope left by Gerald, his grandfather, with specific instructions. It should only be delivered after the separation was officially concluded. Upon opening it, he found a handwritten letter. The grandfather's words were direct, as they always were. "If you're reading this, it means you finally saw what you tried to ignore. Love is beautiful, but it needs to be reciprocal. Don't accept crumbs just because you are loyal. When you renovate houses, always remember, not every foundation is worth keeping. And the same goes for people." Along with the letter, there was the deed to a commercial lot in an area in rapid appreciation. Jason didn't even know about the existence of that land. It was a silent gift, kept for years, waiting for the right moment. That meant more than money or opportunity. It was the way Gerald found to say he was proud of the man his grandson had become. Jason cried. Not for the pain of the past, but for the wisdom of the one who had prepared him to face it. Without hesitation, he decided to build the new headquarters of Ironwood Developments on that land. During the inauguration, with his 3 daughters by his side, looking at the plaque with the company name, Jason felt something deep. He understood, right there, that building houses was what he knew how to do. But building values, integrity, and a true home, that took a lifetime. And that was the true legacy his grandfather had left. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
On a quiet night, David arrives home after a long day at work. He finds Emily, his wife, preparing dinner, and for a moment, he feels grateful for the stable life they have built together. They have been married for 7 years, with no children, but share a solid routine and mutual respect that has always kept them united. David feels they make a good team. He is a dedicated lawyer, always meticulous and detail-oriented. She is a passionate doctor who spends most of her days caring for patients and dealing with the complexity of life and death. However, on that night, something in the air feels different. Emily is thoughtful, distracted as she stirs the pot. David, used to observing people's behavior, notices her distant gaze and feels a subtle discomfort, a feeling he can't explain. He watches her in silence, waiting for her to look him in the eyes, but Emily seems hesitant. Then, without much introduction, she finally breaks the silence and utters a phrase that completely catches him off guard. "David, Michael is in town. Would you mind if I met him for coffee?" The question hangs in the air, and the impact is immediate. David's heart skips a beat, and his mind goes on high alert. He knows that name well, Michael, Emily's ex-boyfriend. He knew Michael had been an important figure in her life before they met, but he never wanted to hear the details. All he knew was that they had ended tumultuously, with heated arguments and unresolved feelings. Still, it was in the past, and he always trusted that the ghosts of that story wouldn't return to haunt the present. David takes a deep breath, trying to understand the reason behind this request. Always rational and balanced, his first reaction is to try to see the positive side. Maybe it's just a casual meeting. Maybe she just wants to close a chapter that was left open. But at the same time, a growing discomfort takes hold of him. He knew Michael's reputation, a charming man who, despite being married, had a history of infidelities and secret affairs. David couldn't help but think about the risk such a meeting could bring, especially since he knew how complicated their breakup had been. With a firm but calm voice, he tries to express his feelings. "Emily, it's not that I want to control your decisions," he says, carefully choosing his words, "but I feel uncomfortable with this idea. You ended things in a complicated way, and I have my reservations about him. Why do you want to see him?" Emily, with an almost indifferent expression, responds, "It's just coffee, David. Michael is passing through town, and I thought it wouldn't hurt. But, if it bothers you, I can back out." The ease with which she agrees leaves David conflicted. He expected more resistance, perhaps an attempt to justify the meeting. But, on the other hand, he feels a momentary relief. She seems to understand, and, in a carefree tone, goes back to preparing dinner as if the matter no longer mattered. This simple response should make him feel at ease, right? But that's not how David feels. Something inside him remains restless, like a premonition that this night is only beginning to stir the first waves of a storm. He observes Emily, now focused on preparing dinner, and tries, unsuccessfully, to shake off the feeling that something much bigger is coming. In the days following that conversation, David tries to return to his usual routine. He convinces himself that Emily accepted his request not to meet Michael, and that the matter is resolved. But deep down, something persists, an unsettling feeling lodged in his mind that won't leave him in peace. He notices that, although she easily agreed not to see her ex-boyfriend, Emily begins to exhibit behaviors that don't match the woman he knows so well. First, it's her schedule that starts to change. Before, Emily always sent a message when she finished work, letting him know she was on her way home. It was such a natural habit between them that David barely noticed, until it stopped happening. Now, there are days when she sends brief messages saying she'll be working late or that an emergency came up at the hospital. He tries to ignore it, convincing himself that maybe she's facing new pressures at work. Still, he can't shake off the idea that there's something more behind these changes. One night, David sees her come home later than usual. He's sitting on the couch, waiting for her, and when he hears the door open, he looks up with discreet anticipation. Emily enters with a tired smile, dropping her bag on the table, but seems a little uncomfortable. He carefully watches her, analyzing her movements, her expressions, looking for something that explains his own discomfort. David always believed he knew Emily better than anyone, but that night she seems a bit distant, and he feels a weight in the air, something invisible, but impossible to ignore. She mutters something about being tired from the day and goes straight to the shower, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He tries to dismiss his insecurity, but his mind returns to the idea of Michael. Could that meeting she promised to avoid actually be happening? His mind begins to question every detail, every small change in Emily's behavior. why would she alter her messaging routine? Why the sudden late nights, and more than anything, why does he feel she's not being completely honest? The next night, another situation reinforces his suspicions. Emily says she will be at the hospital covering a colleague's shift. David, who always trusted her without question, feels his heart tighten at hearing the excuse. He doesn't know if it's paranoia or instinct, but something is wrong. He tries to act normally, but realizes that, instead of feeling relieved by her answers, each new excuse only makes him more suspicious. Even her voice sounds different, as if she's hiding something. Days later, David has a meeting that allows him to go home earlier than expected. He decides not to tell Emily, planning to surprise her with dinner. But upon arriving, he finds the house empty and silent. None of the lights are on, and there's no sign that Emily has been there recently. He sends her a casual message asking about her day, but doesn't receive an immediate response, which is even stranger. Sitting in the dark living room, he stares into the emptiness around him and feels a shiver run down his spine. Emily, the woman he trusted without reservation, is becoming a mystery before his eyes. Each passing day, the uncertainty grows, transforming into a suffocating presence, like a shadow surrounding him without rest. David's rationality begins to give way to a protective instinct, an impulse that tells him he needs to act before something even more devastating happens. He finds himself thinking about how he can uncover the truth, if there is indeed something hidden. This doubt consumes him, robbing him of sleep and the peace that once filled his quiet life. The idea that Emily might be seeing Michael, despite her promise to the contrary, corrodes every part of his trust, until he feels like a stranger in his own home. David decides to confront his suspicions in a different way. He chooses to wait and observe, giving Emily the chance to show if she's really being honest. So, on that day, he leaves work early and goes straight to the hospital where she works. He parks his car in a strategic spot, from where he can see the entrance without being noticed. He checks his watch repeatedly, counting the minutes. She had said it would be a busy night, that she'd be staying late to cover a colleague's shift. But something in her voice, the way she said goodbye that morning, left him with a strange feeling, a certainty that something wasn't right. David takes a deep breath, feeling the tension grow with each passing minute. He knows that if she's telling the truth, she won't leave there anytime soon. But if she's lying, she'll leave shortly after her usual shift ends, and then he'll finally have an answer. Time drags on, and David feels overwhelmed by anxiety. He recalls all the small signs, the changes in Emily's behavior, the excuses for coming home late. Doubt pounds in his mind, and he tries to convince himself that he's being paranoid, that maybe she's just tired from work. Still, he refuses to leave without certainty. When the clock marks the end of Emily's shift, David holds his breath and carefully observes the hospital entrance. And then, to his surprise and despair, he sees her come out. Emily walks through the main door wearing casual clothes and with a calm expression, as if it were just another day. She looks around for a moment, as if wanting to make sure no one is nearby, and then quickly walks toward her car. David feels his heart sink. All his doubts seem confirmed, but he needs to see where this will lead. Carefully, he starts his car and follows her from a safe distance, trying to maintain a reasonable gap so she doesn't notice. She drives calmly, without hurry, as if heading to a planned meeting, and David feels his chest tighten with unbearable pain. A few minutes later, she parks in front of a discreet restaurant, and without delay, gets out of the car. David stops at a safe distance, watching as she waits, checking her watch with an anticipatory look. Then he sees Michael approaching. It's him, the ex-boyfriend Emily said she wouldn't meet. The man David feared might be more than just a memory from the past. They share a quick but familiar hug, and then enter the restaurant together. David watches in silence, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. He realizes this isn't just a casual meeting. The familiarity between them is obvious, and everything he feared begins to unfold before his eyes. Still, he holds back, remaining in the car, waiting to see how far this lie will go. After some time, Emily and Michael leave the restaurant, now even closer. She laughs at something he says, and they get into Michael's car together. The pain David feels is almost unbearable, but he remains firm and continues following them, determined to uncover the whole truth. Every mile seems to destroy a part of his life. Finally, the car stops in front of a motel, and Emily and Michael get out together, entering the place without hesitation. David watches, stunned, as his wife walks through that door with another man. The impact is devastating. All the trust he placed in her now seems like an illusion, something fragile shattered by the weight of betrayal. David feels an indescribable heaviness as he watches Emily enter the motel with Michael. He stays there, watching the door close, and with it, the trust and security he felt in his marriage. His world seems to collapse, but he takes a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. He needs more than just the sight of her crossing that door, he needs proof. Then, his instincts lead him to an unexpected plan. He picks up the phone and, with forced calm, begins drafting a message. She can't know he's there, and he wants her to betray herself. Typing quickly, he writes a cold, almost professional message: "Emily, I need to talk to you urgently. I'm in front of the hospital." He waits, and the silence stretches for a few seconds that feel eternal. He wonders if she'll respond, but suddenly his phone vibrates. It's a message from her: "I can't write right now, David. I'm with patients. It'll take a while." Her blatant and direct lie feels like a stab to the heart. He takes a deep breath, feeling the pain mixed with a cold, calculated anger. Her voice echoes in his mind, insisting she's with patients, and he must gather all his strength not to succumb to the urge to scream, to confront her at that moment. Instead, he decides to keep his discretion and responds, maintaining a balanced tone: "All right, I'll wait at the entrance until you're done." He finishes the message and watches the motel entrance with a patience he didn't know he possessed. He knows this message planted a seed of panic in her, and he's willing to wait as long as necessary to see the result. David remains there, motionless, his eyes fixed on the entrance, and within a few minutes, he sees the result of his plan. The motel door opens, and Emily comes out in a hurry with Michael. Her face is marked by tension, her eyes restless, as if searching for something or someone. It's as if she knows what she's doing is wrong, but still tries to rationalize her actions. When he sees her there, at the motel entrance, David feels a mix of disgust and, at the same time, a kind of liberation. Finally, the whole truth is exposed, and he no longer needs to live with doubts and uncertainties. She looks around, clearly nervous, until, in an instant, their eyes meet. She freezes upon seeing him across the street, silently watching her. David maintains a steady gaze, without reaction, as if all the emotions inside him are hidden behind a cold mask of indifference. He doesn't need to say anything, and Emily seems to understand everything in a second. Her expression changes from surprise to something close to despair, and she starts walking toward him, her eyes pleading for a chance to explain. But David doesn't allow space for explanations. Without a single word, he turns his back and walks away, leaving her standing still, immobile, between the motel and the emptiness of her own choices. David gets into his car, firmly closes the door, and drives away without looking back. The image of Emily paralyzed on the sidewalk is etched in his mind like an indelible mark. He drives through the city streets without a clear destination, driven only by the need to distance himself from that place, from that betrayal. Each mile traveled brings with it an avalanche of memories of the moments they built together, now shattered, as if they meant nothing. He feels a mix of anger, sadness, and, above all, a void that seems to consume every part of his soul. The night passes, and he can't go home immediately. The place that once meant safety now seems strange, stained by the memory of betrayal. He stops at a hotel, a modest place far from his neighborhood, and decides that's where he'll spend the night. After checking in, he enters the room and sits on the bed, looking at the empty walls, unsure of what to do. David picks up his phone and sees several missed calls and messages from Emily, all begging him to listen, to give her a chance to explain. He doesn't respond to any of them. The sense of betrayal, of seeing his love so easily discarded, consumes him. He reads her messages, each word filled with empty excuses and justifications. She begs, saying she made a mistake, that he needs to give her a chance to explain, but to him, it all seems like a hastily constructed lie, an attempt to cover up something that is already as clear as day. That night, he can't sleep. His mind replays every detail of their relationship, analyzing all the times he believed she was sincere, that her love was genuine. He wonders how many other lies she may have hidden, how many other nights she may have spent with Michael or anyone else. The doubt consumes him, turning every happy memory into a painful unanswered question. The next morning, David makes a decision. He knows it can't be delayed. He goes back home, determined to close this chapter once and for all. Upon entering, everything is exactly as he left it, but now the atmosphere feels different, almost strange. He notices how those walls, once full of meaning, now feel empty, stripped of the life they shared. He gathers his things, packing each item into a suitcase with the same cold determination he used to confront her the night before. Photos, clothes, objects that once represented their story now become mere reminders of a farce. David doesn't leave anything behind that could bring back memories of that betrayal. Each folded piece of clothing feels like a part of the past he decides to tear out of his life without hesitation. Emily arrives home in the middle of this process, her face marked by anxiety, her desperate gaze. She tries to approach, trying to explain, but he doesn't bother to listen. With every sentence she begins, he remains silent, avoiding looking at her directly, as if he were a stranger in his own home. When he finishes packing, David lifts his head and looks at her. His eyes are cold, as if she were merely an acquaintance, someone he briefly glimpsed. He opens the door and, without saying a single word, crosses the threshold of the house that now belongs solely to her and the void she created. He leaves there with his head held high, certain that there's nothing more to say, and leaves behind not just a house, but also a love that turned out to be an illusion. David drives to the hotel with his suitcases, leaving behind the home he built with Emily and everything he once believed was a solid and true life. His mind is full of conflicting thoughts, but one idea begins to take shape, a decision born out of a sense of justice, an almost uncontrollable impulse to close this story with one last truth revealed. While in the hotel room, he recalls every detail of that night, Emily's coldness in lying to him and the way she interacted with Michael, as if David were irrelevant. Something inside him drives him to seek justice, not to cause pain, but to bring the truth to light, as if it could somehow balance things. At that moment, he decides to do something he never imagined. He searches through the photos on his phone and selects the image of Emily and Michael entering the motel together, indisputable proof of the betrayal. With calmness and precision, he opens social media and begins searching for information about Michael. It doesn't take long to find Laura's profile, Michael's wife. She appears to be a kind woman, with a warm smile in the photos she posts alongside Michael, family moments and trips, a life that, to any observer, seems full of happiness and trust. David feels a heaviness seeing that, knowing how similar it was to the life he thought he had until just a few days ago. Still, he knows it's the right thing to do. Laura deserves to know the truth, just as he had to face it. He writes a short and direct message, attaching the photo he took that painful night. Each word is carefully measured, as he understands the weight of what he's doing. He imagines himself in her place, receiving such devastating news, and feels a mix of sadness and relief, as if he's finally closing the last page of a bitter chapter. Minutes after sending the message, he steps away from the phone, feeling an odd inner peace. He doesn't expect a response, nor does he wish to prolong the matter. For him, it's enough that the truth has been told, that Laura has the chance to know who she's married to and can make her own decisions from there. It's a burden he carries with some bitterness, but with the firmness of knowing he did the right thing. The next day, David is awakened by the sound of notifications on his phone. Among the many messages Emily continues to send, there's a response from Laura. He hesitates for a moment but ends up opening the message. Laura thanks him for his honesty and says that, although the news was devastating, she's grateful to finally know what was going on. In her words, he senses pain, but also an unexpected strength. Laura mentions that she has already made her decision and doesn't plan to give Michael another chance to lie. Upon reading those words, David feels that his decision brought closure not only for him but also for someone who, like him, was deceived by those they trusted most. After all the turmoil that consumed him, David feels it's time for a complete fresh start. He spends the following days alone in the hotel, dealing with a mix of emotions, while organizing what's left of his life. Determined to turn the page, he makes one of the most important decisions of his life: to move to a new city. Since he was young, he dreamed of living near the sea, in a quiet town where the sound of the waves could be a balm for his soul and where the open horizon invited new beginnings. With this renewed desire, he finally finds the courage to make it a reality. Without hesitation, he researches coastal towns, places where life seems simpler and routines are governed by the rhythm of nature. The idea of walking barefoot on the sand, feeling the sea breeze on his face, brings a glimpse of the peace he so desires. In a few days, he organizes everything he needs, wraps up commitments, and signs the final divorce papers, the definitive end of a chapter marked by pain and disillusionment. Arriving in the new city is more liberating than he imagined. He chooses a small, cozy apartment with a wide view of the sea. Each morning feels like a rebirth, a chance to rewrite his story far from all the memories of the past. David realizes that, for the first time in a long while, he's living for himself, rediscovering interests and dreams he had set aside in the rush of marriage and an exhausting routine. Gradually, he begins to establish a new routine: morning walks along the beach at sunrise, runs on the boardwalk, coffee at small local spots where he feels part of a community. He meets new people, forms casual friendships, and finds a peace he had never experienced before. The void that once consumed him begins to be replaced by a serenity he thought unattainable. Over time, the memories of Emily and the betrayal become less painful, like scars that, though present, no longer hurt as they once did. He learns to live with them, to see them as part of a life that no longer belongs to him. The ocean, with its vastness, seems to absorb the last traces of his sadness, and he begins to see the future with a lightness that once seemed impossible. David fully embraces this new life, exploring every corner of the city, every possibility that freedom offers. Gradually, he feels whole again, rediscovering who he truly is without the weight of past disappointments. The days pass, and David finds a calm balance in his new routine. He gets involved with the local community, meets people who lead simple but profound lives, and gradually rediscovers the beauty in small things. Life by the sea has brought him a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. Over time, he feels stronger, more at peace, as if the salt of the sea had washed away all traces of the pain he left behind. On a quiet afternoon, while sitting at an outdoor cafe, watching the ebb and flow of the waves, David receives an unexpected message from an old friend, someone who still keeps in touch with Emily. Reluctantly, he opens the message and, upon reading it, feels a mix of surprise and strange indifference. Emily, the woman he once loved deeply, has fallen into depression since the divorce. She seems to have sunk into regret and sadness, spending entire days isolated and in silence. David sits there, looking at the phone, absorbing the words without the pain he thought he might feel. The impact that the news would have caused before now feels like a distant echo. He realizes this information no longer affects him as it might have in the past, as if it were someone else's story, a closed and locked chapter of the past. He reflects for a few minutes, his eyes lost in the blue horizon. He wonders if he should feel something stronger, a desire to try to help, to extend a hand to someone who was once his partner. But he doesn't feel that. He has freed himself from the chains of that relationship and now sees that sometimes life's lessons come through pain and separation. Everyone must face the consequences of their actions, and Emily is facing hers. Taking a deep breath, he puts the phone back in his pocket and lifts his gaze to the sea, which stretches infinitely before him. The waves break softly, one after another, as if affirming that life follows its natural course. He understands that this peace, this new life he has built with so much effort, can no longer be affected by the past. He did everything he could, stayed true to himself, and now he's where he needs to be. David stands up and walks toward the beach, his feet sinking into the warm sand. The breeze touches his face, and he closes his eyes, letting the sea completely envelop him. Now, he knows he has found what he was looking for, a life where he is true to himself, a life where the pain of the past has become lessons, a distant memory that no longer interferes with the present. And with every step he takes, he feels freer, more complete. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Bradley Thompson had always trusted his own perception. From a very young age, he learned to listen to what people's eyes didn't say. And it was this perception that, little by little, began to bother him inside his own home. Vanessa, his wife of nearly a decade, had always been affectionate, fun, present. But lately, that sparkle in her eyes had faded. The hug no longer felt the same. Conversations ended quicker than they began, and any question about work was answered with generic phrases and a forced smile. Unlike what many would do, Bradley remained silent. He avoided arguments. He preferred to observe. Vanessa's cell phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, now stayed glued to her hand, screen face down. Meetings, which once followed a predictable routine, now stretched into the late hours. And on the few nights they managed to have dinner together, she seemed distracted, laughing alone at the messages arriving on her phone, always excusing herself by saying it was some coworker telling something funny. The excuses started to repeat. First, it was a launch event that lasted past midnight. Then, a happy hour that came up last minute and extended until the early hours of the morning. With each new excuse, Bradley's certainty grew. But he didn't want to act out of anger. He was fully aware that any accusation, without proof, could turn against him. So, he took a deep breath and decided to seek the truth the only way he knew would work, by hiring someone to observe for him. He contacted a private detective with an impeccable reputation. Discreet, efficient, and straight to the point. Without much preamble, he explained what was happening. The detective simply nodded and asked for 2 weeks. During that time, Bradley tried to keep the routine as if nothing was wrong. He said good morning, prepared coffee, took out the trash like he always did. He continued sleeping in the same bed, hearing the same sighs beside him, trying not to show the whirlwind growing inside. He started paying even more attention to the times, the different perfumes she wore when leaving, the way she dressed for work. Clothes that used to be reserved for special occasions were now office looks. 2 weeks passed, and the detective called. He asked to meet in person. Bradley arrived at the agreed location, and without any introduction, the man handed him a brown envelope. Inside was a sequence of images that looked ripped from a nightmare, Vanessa leaving a remote hotel next to a man Bradley recognized instantly. Scott Henderson. Her boss. A married man, father of 2, who had been invited to lunch at their house a few times, who had complimented Vanessa's cooking and shaken Bradley's hand with a cynical smile on his lips. The photos showed kisses outside the hotel, hands intertwined, laughter exchanged inside the car. Some had dates, times, locations. The report detailed everything. Vanessa had lied about every event she claimed to have attended. The supposed meetings and business trips were just excuses for her encounters with Scott. Bradley read each line with an almost unnatural calm. He didn't cry. He didn't lash out. He just took a deep breath and thanked the detective. He put the envelope away and went home. That night, Vanessa arrived around 8 o'clock, with the same energy as always, as if returning from another exhausting day. She dropped her bag on the sofa and took off her shoes at the entrance. Bradley was waiting for her, sitting at the kitchen table. In silence, he slid the envelope toward her. She looked at it, confused, and then began to open it. When she pulled out the first photos, her hands trembled. All color drained from her face. She still tried to pretend, claiming it was fake, but her voice came out shaky, disconnected from the look of despair in her eyes. The photos kept coming, one by one. Each page destroyed another previous excuse. She fell to her knees on the floor, hands clasped, begging for forgiveness. She said it was a mistake, that she regretted it, that it was temporary, that it meant nothing, that she loved Bradley, that she had been weak. But he just stared, without changing his tone, without raising his voice. She tried to approach him, crying, her voice breaking, touching his knee as if she still had the right to ask for forgiveness. But Bradley had already made his decision. He got up from the chair with the same calmness of someone who already knew how that night would end. He walked to the door, turned the handle, and opened it without saying a word. With his arm extended, he simply pointed. In the hallway, next to the wall, were her suitcases, which he had packed hours earlier. Vanessa stopped, her face distorted by tears, mumbling something that died in the air. He remained firm, without blinking. She then understood. She walked over to the suitcases, picked them up one by one, crossed the door, and disappeared into the darkness of the street. Bradley closed the door slowly, locked it, leaned back against the cold wood, and let out a long sigh. Not of relief, but of closure. That was the end. And within that house, her name would never be spoken again. Vanessa left the house pushing her suitcase, her eyes wet with tears and her pride shattered. As she reached the sidewalk, she turned her face hoping to see Bradley hesitate, but the door remained closed, and the silence inside was more eloquent than any shout. She walked to the car and got in without saying a word. Before starting the engine, she rested her forehead on the steering wheel for a few seconds, trying to control her breathing. Then she picked up her phone and called the one person who, in her mind, would always be on her side, her mother, Donna. As soon as she said she had been kicked out of the house, that Bradley had thrown her out, Donna responded as she always did, with outrage. She said it was absurd, that no man had the right to do that to a woman, especially not to his own wife. Half an hour later, Vanessa parked in front of the house where she had grown up, the same place where her mistakes were always ignored, where her wrong choices were justified with ready-made speeches and quick hugs. Where, for her, the world revolved around her own desires. Donna opened her arms as soon as her daughter entered. She said it was cruel, that no man had the right to do what Bradley did. She cried with her, cradling her as if she were 5 years old again. In her mother's eyes, there was no questioning, only indignation. As soon as Vanessa calmed down, Donna called Bradley. Her tone was one of restrained fury, as if she herself had been offended. She asked what had happened, why he had acted that way with her daughter. Bradley, firm, replied only with what was necessary: "She betrayed me. And I have proof." The response didn't seem to have the expected effect. Donna raised her voice, saying he was exaggerating, that marriage was serious business, that he should have talked to Vanessa and resolved things between them, that exposing her daughter like that was inhumane. Bradley listened to everything in silence before responding. She had every chance to choose what was right. She chose to betray. Even in the face of the truth, Donna refused to see what was right in front of her. Her daughter, even as an adult, even married, even wrong, was still the same untouchable girl who could never be reprimanded. In the days that followed, Vanessa sank into regret, but a strange kind of regret, more for the loss of comfort than for having destroyed the marriage. She wanted to turn back time, but without admitting guilt. She tried to justify her wrong decisions, saying the marriage had become lukewarm, that Scott made her feel alive, that everything with Bradley was predictable. But the truth was simpler: she wasn't ready to deal with the weight of her own choices. Every day, she called her ex-husband. She sent long messages, others short, tried to reach him at work, waited in front of the building, talked to mutual acquaintances, all in vain. The calls went straight to voicemail. The messages, though marked as read, never received a reply. She tried to get friends in common to intervene, but no one wanted to get involved. Bradley's hurt had run too deep, and the way he handled everything, with such control, made it clear there was no going back. Each failed attempt only increased her desperation. Scott, the man for whom Vanessa risked everything, began to distance himself as soon as he realized the extent of the mess she brought with her. In the first few days, she still managed to contact him. She sent messages, called, vented about what Bradley had done. She said he cruelly kicked her out of the house, as if she were a disposable object. Scott listened with some surprise, but Vanessa omitted a crucial detail: she never mentioned the proof of the betrayal, let alone the photos. She preferred to portray herself as the victim of an impulsive and vengeful husband. But even without knowing everything, Scott quickly realized that the woman who once seemed exciting and full of life was now an emotional burden. The conversations became cold, filled with uncomfortable silences. Vanessa clung to him as her last hope for stability, but he already saw her as a problem about to explode. When she called, he avoided answering. When she managed to talk, she cried, demanded attention, and he found excuses to hang up. Until one day, he simply stopped responding. He vanished from her life as easily as he had entered. Vanessa found herself alone, rejected by the one who used her, ignored by the one who loved her. She began to lose her appetite, her sleep, her control. Inside her mother's house, she curled up on the couch as if that space were a capsule of denial, a place where everything she had done could be erased with sweet words and protective hugs. But not even Donna could calm her daughter's breakdowns anymore. She watched Vanessa sink into regret, and though she didn't admit it aloud, she began to realize that this time, perhaps her daughter had gone too far. The divorce envelope arrived days after yet another failed attempt to contact Bradley. Vanessa was sitting on the couch at her mother's house when the mail was delivered. Seeing her ex-husband's name as the sender, she felt a tightness in her stomach. She opened it hurriedly, tearing the paper with trembling fingers. She read the first line, and immediately her eyes filled with tears. It made official what she refused to accept. It was over. The divorce was underway. Everything real, no turning back. Donna entered the living room and found her daughter sobbing, the papers scattered on the floor. She rushed to pick them up and, upon reading the contents, let out a sigh of indignation. But, contrary to what Vanessa expected, her mother didn't offer immediate comfort. She asked what else Vanessa had hidden. She said this was going too far. For the first time, Donna didn't blindly defend her daughter. They argued. Vanessa shouted, accused her mother of turning her back, of not understanding, of not knowing how much she was suffering. Donna retorted, saying Vanessa had dug this hole herself. It was a nasty fight. The night passed with doors slamming and heavy silences. The following days were marked by waiting and anguish. Vanessa barely ate, barely slept. She spent hours sitting, staring at her phone, waiting for something that never came. The judge's ruling was issued 2 weeks later. Vanessa read the result with a pale face. The judge had ruled in Bradley's favor. The evidence submitted, the reports, the images, everything worked against her. Bradley kept most of the assets, including the house where they had lived for years. Vanessa was left with the basics. When she finished reading the decision, she went upstairs, locked the door, and cried like a child. Her mother stayed outside, listening to everything, without the courage to knock or say a word. The next morning, Vanessa didn't go to work. She lied to HR, claiming she was feeling unwell. She got up, changed clothes, and drove to the house where she was once a wife, where she believed something of hers still remained. She parked across the street, staring at the unmoving facade. Everything seemed the same, but there was something different. An air of exclusion. As if the entire place had been cleansed of her. She walked to the door and tried to open it with her old key. Nothing. The lock had been changed. That hurt more than the envelope. She went around the side of the house and headed straight for the living room window, which she knew had a small defect. She forced it, pushed it, and managed to get in. Inside, what she saw was like a stab in the heart. The photos of the two of them were gone. The bedroom had been reorganized, the paintings replaced. Everything showed that Bradley was moving on. She walked through the house feeling like she was invading the life of a stranger. She ran her fingers along the shelves, opened drawers, searching for traces of herself. When she realized there was none left, she lost control. She opened the kitchen cabinets and started throwing everything on the floor. Plates, glasses, utensils. She went to the living room and knocked over picture frames, books, dragged the cushions, kicked the couch. She opened the back door and went to the garden. She tore the flowers out of the flower bed with her bare hands. The dirt stuck to her fingers, but she kept going. It was as if she wanted to destroy everything that reminded her of what once belonged to her. As if, by breaking every object, she could erase what she felt. She had no idea that everything was being recorded. After the separation, Bradley had installed internal and external cameras, anticipating any reckless action. The moment she forced the window, the system notified him. He watched everything in real time, without surprise, just with a blank expression. He called the police and reported the break-in, informed them he had footage, showed the separation documents. Minutes later, the police arrived. Vanessa was sitting on the living room floor, her eyes red, her face dirty with dirt, surrounded by shards. She tried to explain, said she just wanted to see the house, that she wouldn't hurt anyone, that she still felt part of it. But nothing she said convinced them. She was taken under charges of trespassing and vandalism. In the back seat of the patrol car, she remained silent, feeling the weight of shame and humiliation, realizing that every wrong step had led her exactly here. At the police station, Vanessa sat silently for hours. She signed the papers the officer placed in front of her, answered questions mechanically, and avoided making eye contact with anyone. The dirt on her hands and arms was wiped clean with a damp cloth the officer herself handed her. Outside, reporters were already waiting. News of the break-in had spread on social media within minutes. The footage captured by the security cameras was circulating on neighborhood pages, local groups, and gossip profiles. You could clearly see her forcing the window, entering the house, destroying objects, tearing out flowers. There was no context to justify it. The comments were merciless. People she didn't even know were treating her like a known criminal. When she left the station, Donna was waiting in the car. She didn't say a word. Not a good morning, not a word of comfort. For the first time, her mother seemed exhausted, as if she had finally realized something more serious was happening. Vanessa got in the car and stayed silent. When they got home, she went straight to her room and locked the door. She spent the next 2 days in complete isolation. With social media flooded with criticism and mockery, she opted to delete her accounts. The messages she received now were from coworkers demanding explanations, friends distancing themselves, people from college commenting they could hardly believe what they saw. The company where she worked called an emergency meeting. Vanessa tried to justify what happened as a moment of emotional imbalance, said she was going through a difficult divorce, that she had lost control. She tried to appeal to the human side of the managers. But the images had already gone viral. The scandal, involving her affair with Scott, was known to everyone because Bradley had posted the proof of the betrayal online. HR, after reviewing the situation, communicated their decision: immediate dismissal for misconduct and negative exposure to the company's brand. She left the meeting room carrying a box with her belongings, feeling like she had hit rock bottom, without realizing there was still more. Scott, who had been absent until then, briefly reappeared to give a single cold response: I hope you recover soon," and disappeared for good. His wife, upon discovering everything through social media, filed for divorce, kicked him out of the house, and publicly exposed that he was a repeat offender. Scott was fired shortly after, citing damage to the company's image and unethical behavior. Their downfall was as rapid as it was intense. None of those involved emerged unscathed. But while Scott vanished from the radar and sought to rebuild his life in silence, Vanessa seemed to sink deeper with every attempt to breathe. Bradley observed everything from a distance. He didn't respond to media messages, ignored attempts to contact him from curious acquaintances, and didn't even discuss the matter with his own colleagues. Some criticized him for exposing his ex-wife, but most saw his actions as a proportional response to the pain she had caused. He remained silent, and it was precisely this silence that made his dignity unquestionable. Months later, Donna appeared at his door. Her face weary, her voice low, holding a bag with some of her daughter's documents and asking him to reconsider the criminal charges. She said Vanessa was already paying dearly, that she had lost everything, that she was depressed, that she barely left her room. Bradley listened in silence. When she finished, he simply replied, "She chose the path. And now she's reaping what she sowed." Donna persisted, but he remained unmoved. He closed the door with the same calmness of someone who understands that some wounds don't need healing, just closure. Back at her mother's house, Vanessa stared at the walls, unsure what to do with her own thoughts. She no longer cried often. It was a different emptiness, as if her body were present but her mind wandered through a time she could no longer reach. She tried seeking professional help but quit therapy after 3 sessions, claiming everything she heard only increased her guilt. She tried looking for a job, but interviews ended vaguely, and some interviewers didn't even hide their discomfort upon recognizing her. The internet doesn't forgive, and her name was already associated with a series of failures and scandals hard to erase. Over time, Vanessa only left the house for essentials. Her friends drifted away, the messages stopped, and even her mother, once so protective, began treating her with a certain coldness. The sense of isolation was total. And still, Bradley didn't speak. No public words, no provocations, no attempts at confrontation. He simply disappeared from her life permanently. He changed his number, sold his car, left social media, moved to another state. It was as if she had been erased from his existence. It was only after all of this, after the entire collapse, that Vanessa understood what she had truly lost. It wasn't just the house, the marriage, or the job. She had lost the one person who saw her as someone worth more than her own mistakes. And when she finally realized this, she understood that the silence Bradley chose was, in fact, the greatest lesson he could have left. Because some wounds scream, but some answers weigh far heavier when left unspoken. And he chose silence, moved forward, and rebuilt, without her. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.